in 1997, 98, we launched the first kind of new wave of men's magazines in the US, which was Maxim magazine. So we launched 2 magazines within a year, Maxim and Stuff. Both did very well. Maxim did phenomenally well. And then I actually took over at Maxim and ran Maxim for 4 or 5 years. I worked for Flutter for a while and Matt King over there. And then all around that period, those contracts ran out. And I thought, you know what, I want another chapter. So we started Redknot. COVID scenarios, I launched Redknot, which is a boutique agency, but works kind of at the intersection of sports and sports betting and iGaming and media.
Thank you for all those parties. I was in the music business, and the relationship with Maxim was always fun. The artist always wanted to go to the Maxim parties.
Kevin still has all the magazines.
Yeah, right.
In his basement. Hello. Today we're joined by Andy Clerkson, CEO at Redknot. Andy, you have a quite interesting story. Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thanks for inviting me on, guys. Yeah, I mean, I'm now currently fully immersed and engaged in sports betting industry. Have been for a number of years, which I get to. But I started a career. I've had a kind of a reasonably long career in publishing and media. So my journey to Redknot came via some early day publishing expertise out of New York City, actually, and in the US. And then I parlayed that kind of career move into sports betting, actually, in 2006. I'll tell you about. Built a technology company, sold that to a large sports betting operator. And then I actually worked as a consultant on a number of US projects after PASPA was repealed. And then post kind of 2020 COVID scenarios, I launched Redknot, which is a boutique agency, but works kind of at the intersection of sports and sports betting and iGaming and media. And the reason that I launched Redknot with some experienced partners was because we felt there was a large gap, especially in the US market, actually, for real deep gaming knowledge and how the operators literally operate, and telling those narratives and those stories. And we found there was a lot of companies that were looking for investment, companies that were looking to gain partners, a lot on the B2B side, and supplying into the big chain of big operators. And a lot of those people needed some guidance because it was a very new market in the US in 2018, 2019. And we felt that Redknot could really help some of those companies, which we have. So that's the kind of overview on the journey. Tell me if you want to get into the details.
Yeah, I mean, we've been working with Redknot for a few years, Kevin and I. It's been absolutely great experience for us. Finally get to meet the person at the top. So again, thanks again for joining us. But yeah, I mean, what would be interesting? I mean, yeah, you mentioned you worked on the tech side of things. How did that kind of prime you for opening up Redknot?
Yeah, it's I initially started my career in publishing in London, and then it was at a time in the mid-90s when men's magazines, lifestyle magazines, are really taken off in the UK. And I started a magazine here called Stuff, and it was about gadgets. I mean, this is really like 1996, 97. And I worked for a company called Dennis Publishing, and it was my idea, and I launched this magazine. And the magazine was aimed at young guys that were interested in everything from mobile phones that had just started to, really resonate, cars, golf clubs, you name it. We would test it, and it had a real kind of men's, irreverent feel. And that was the idea of the magazine. Magazine did very well, and in our stable we also had another magazine called Maxim, which was not about technology but was about kind of girls and beer and lifestyle. And that magazine in the UK was doing okay. It was not the top of those magazines, but that market had really grown. And then the guy that ran the company, he's no longer with us, unfortunately, but was a very influential publishing guy called Felix Dennis, was kind of super famous in the UK. He decided he could transplant these ideas to the US. So in 1997, 98, we launched the first kind of new wave of men's magazines in the US, which was Maxim magazine, which a lot of people, certainly over the age of 35, will probably know. And I came over actually to launch Stuff. So we launched 2 magazines within a year, Maxim and Stuff. Both did very well. Maxim did phenomenally well. And then I actually took over at Maxim and ran Maxim for 4 or 5 years, up until the company actually sold to private equity in 2007. So that was an incredible journey. Learned a lot about the US, about the media landscape in the US. We, we had offices in most of the major cities, and it was a powerhouse product. Incredible, actually. Now, when we think of magazines, have struggled so much since the days of the internet, and was one of the things that kind of brought down maybe our magazine in a certain way. But there were certain months where we were making $100 million in ad revenue over the year, $10 million months. It was crazy, and we were seen as the voice or the vehicle for people to reach that demographic of guys from college age, up into, probably up into their 50s, to be honest, but certainly up into their late 30s. So it was an amazing journey, but I had, and we were always going to the company was always looking to sell. That was the kind of MO of our company. We would build things and we would sell them. And as we sold, I had to think about what I wanted to do. And to be honest, I'd always been really interested in horse racing, and I've been a bettor in many ways, and enjoyed kind of days out racing. And I wanted to launch a content magazine around sports betting. But the idea was that it wouldn't just be around racing, it would be around betting on sports. So football, baseball, basketball, etc. But the timing wasn't great because it was 2006, early 2007. And as we all know, the law changed pretty quickly. The Wire Act was enforced, and there was no growth of sports betting in the US. So I kind of had a decision to make, personally with my family, which was, do I stay in the US and stay in publishing and ignore sports betting and this kind of passion that I'd had and interest in getting involved in that industry, or do I leave the US and actually go back to the UK where lots was happening in terms of online had just started, we were still not really thinking about mobile phones. So we made the decision that we would move back to the UK actually, and I started a business in the UK. First idea being publishing, and I thought, raise some money, bring out a newspaper. Sounds so old. A newspaper that's concerned, about tips and interesting things around sports betting. But it was obvious pretty quickly that the market here had already moved fully digital. So then I started some affiliate, kind of businesses because I was a content guy. But then I met a guy who kind of changed my thoughts around technology, which I'd never been massively involved in before. But I wanted to launch a kind of a news betting site whereby the prices and the opportunities were all surfaced in the news site. And I met a guy who became my business partner, actually, phenomenal guy called Dominic Hawkin, who had already been involved in various kind of syndicate operations where he's thinking about automated betting. And he said, I can build us a website where we take these APIs of companies like Betfair. There were very few APIs in 2007, 2008. It's all very early days. He said, and we can basically create news sites around betting and run their odds dynamically live onto the site. So I thought that was really cool. We built a site for Betfair. We ran the content, we ran the odds, and then suddenly this company that I had, which was called Grand Parade, very quickly morphed into a technology company. And we realized that we could help a lot of the operators by building them bits of tech. We called them widgets, but they might be live scoreboards or elements of the site that would be like looking at stats and running up statistical analysis live on their websites. We could do it quicker than they could. They had pretty, they had big platforms. They were really worried about payments. They were worried about the thing being, the website being operational and not having too many delays. And their big tech organizations of the big operators kind of had enough on their plate, and they couldn't do the cool kind of marketing things, or they couldn't react quick enough to events. So, a March Madness or a Super Bowl, say, the marketing guys would want some had some idea around a way to generate more activity, to get kind of people coming in to the site on a free-to-play game kind of aspect or something like that, but they couldn't build it. So my company started to build these things, and we grew over 7 or 8 years, and that obviously moved into mobile phones. And then we became really advanced on the mobile phone sports betting platforms of kind of adding content to bookmakers. So we worked for, William Hill, Ladbrokes, Coral, Betfair, BWin, Bet365, you name it. The UK guys were all using our services. And then I built that company up, and was approached by William Hill in 2016 to buy the company. So they bought the company from me, which when I sold it was a full tech company at that point. So there was me, a content guy, that had got into this because I thought we'd write articles around tips on sports betting, and we ended up building mobile phone platforms for operators. And William Hill bought that because we had developed a sports betting kind of engine, so like a pricing engine, and they really wanted that. And actually they bought that, and that pricing engine is still the core component of what is now Caesars pricing. Wow. So that was that journey. So yeah, that was good. It was 9 years or 8 years. I did it as a kind of second career in technology after publishing, really. We had a massive dev operation in Krakow in Poland, where I had, massive, but for me it was big, 180 people. I ran it out of London, and we ran it, working with mostly European and Australian clients at first. And then from 2013, I started to work back in the US when New Jersey changed the law on online casino. So my company actually designed, as in kind of UX and UI and the graphics of the resorts casino website, Mohegan Sun and Golden Nugget. So we did all of that kind of front end work for those guys. So that was great. Sold the company to William Hill. I did, a small earn out in the UK. And then I was kind of happy to leave William Hill and think about another chapter. But I got a call from CEO of William Hill at the time, a guy called Joe Asher, who's a phenomenally important person in the American landscape of sports betting industry. He had had his own betting company, which merged with 2 others to form William Hill as a land-based sports betting operation, the biggest out of Nevada. And Joe called and said, I know you know a lot about kind of digital and marketing, and you know a bit about the US, where it looks like PASPA's going to get repealed, and we need to set up our digital operations out of New Jersey. So I actually came over and did about 8 months with Joe and the team, helping, and the PASPA did get repealed during that period. And we launched William Hill Online. So I was kind of heavily involved as a consultant on that. And then just to round this out, I kind of thought, I was still living in London, but I was working in Hoboken, so this was not going massively well with the family. I was in and out, so I kind of thought, right, I'm going to go back to the UK and really focus on UK-based work. And then I got a call from another, really good contact of mine who was working at PokerStars. And he said, hey, we know you know a lot about media and tech in the US. We want to do a deal in the US with a media company. Can you come and help us look at a deal? So I was like, actually, that sounds pretty exciting. And we did. And then that became Fox Sports became the partner. Fox Bet became the product. And then I ended up working as a strategic advisor on the board of Fox Bet up until 2020. And we launched Fox Bet in Pennsylvania and New Jersey, which was great fun. Lockdown kind of shut us down. Flutter bought Fox Bet. I worked for Flutter for a while and Matt King over there. And then all around that period, those contracts ran out. And I thought, you know what, I want another chapter. So we started Red Knot. So there you go. There's the full kind of story. So, by the time I got to Red Knot, I have a lot of background in US sports betting and gaming, a massive media background, actually, which is what Red Knot's really about, which is, trying to kind of, work the narrative and the media relations for any sports betting companies or gaming companies. And obviously, during that period, I learned a hell of a lot as well around kind of regulatory frameworks and, and all the stuff sitting with the lawyers while we were trying to do these deals. So yeah, a lot of inputs into, into Red Knot, which has been fun to build. And now we have, kind of 15, 16 kind of really kind of, high level clients in the sports betting, gaming and sports space. So there you go.
Yeah, that's
wow. It's amazing.
I think that's the longest and most interesting intro we've had so far.
It's like the history of sports betting.
Both A+.
Yeah. With the whole thing about Maxim too. Thank you for all those parties. I was in the music business, and the relationship with Maxim was always fun. The artist always wanted to go to the Maxim parties.
Well, Kevin still has all the magazines.
Yeah, right.
In his basement.
Some of them are worth a few quid now. Some of them are worth
it's but it's interesting how you've actually kind of crossed paths in your career with DataArt. DataArt is a tech company, and is in the weeds building Betfair, and is always in the background. But now when you're at Red Knot, and you're looking at your client base, it seems like a lot of tech first type companies. It seems like now from your Maxim days, you now look at the world, with the content eye, but also a tech guy. So when you look at you have a really cool client base, people that we've talked to, when you look at your clients or bring onboarding, are you looking tech first? What are you looking, to start that relationship or get excited about?
Yeah, so it's a really good question, Kevin. I think you're right. We do see content as tech. I mean, I think in that long intro, there was a bit that we get lost in. I was thinking when I started my tech company, which wasn't a tech company at the time, that content was our guys sitting down, tapping away and writing 300, 500 word articles, and it was this guy that I met who was a kind of inspirational kind of CTO who showed me that actually content was about, live dynamic data, and it's how we visualize that and how we use that. And that tells its own story. And that took me on that journey completely. So I think for us now, we understand there's a few partners that have worked in media and sports betting for a while at Red Knot. They've got a good experience. And I think we understand that the technology side of anybody's offering is ultimately really where their kind of story, is going to be best told. Everyone's got interesting stories around, but it's like, what are you actually building and what are you actually contributing to the industry? And that's where we focus first. And we've been very lucky that we have signed clients who have very innovative technology backgrounds. So one of our clients, and I think you've certainly had the CEO, Sean Coley, on here, is Angstrom Sports. Angstrom. Phenomenal tech. I met those guys actually in London a number of years ago. And when they got to the point of raising money is kind of when Red Knot sometimes comes in, because you've got super clever tech guys building their modeling, building their, their own predictive modeling and their bespoke kind of pricing models. But then there's a point where to raise above the competition, or to certainly get your voice amplified so that operators out there kind of see you. And when you go to those shows in Vegas or in Atlantic City or in New Jersey or wherever they may be, people actually understand what you do. And that's kind of where Red Knot have come in. So sometimes we talk to the tech guys because they do great stuff, but don't always know how to tell their story. Maybe they're bashful and a little shy, so or maybe they just know what they do is good, but they don't really even want to be in part of that narrative. So I think we've got quite a sweet spot in innovative technology companies and being able to, tell that narrative. Another one, and obviously Angstrom had a very successful outcome by selling recently to Entain, which was fantastic and thoroughly deserved. One of our first clients was a company called Sport Caller, who were at the time, certainly still are, but at the leading edge of free-to-play gaming. They were one of the first kind of free-to-play game providers, but they had a real core technology base. So they weren't just pushing out small, simple games. They had ways of getting behind. They had clever tech guys that knew how to kind of get inside an operator's platform securely, and therefore that the operator would, allow them to come in and use their games inside their platform for retention. And that company, became very popular very quickly, but we managed to kind of tell that story and help Killian Barry, who was the CEO there, kind of get out in the US press, and then they were acquired by Bally's actually in 2021. So again, they rose above the competition.
Right.
Great technology, but maybe Red Knot helped them a little bit along the way in terms of just being able to voice, what it was that they were doing that was different. So I think, and we have a number. I won't go through them all, but yeah, we probably specialize a lot in kind of companies that are B2B. Maybe they're supplying into the big guys, the DraftKings, the FanDuels, the Fanatics, the Bally's, whatever it might be. But they take Red Knot on, one, to help them become a bigger name in the industry and to us to amplify the voice. And also sometimes we have very long-term kind of business press relationships and technology press relationships as well. Some of it from mine and one of our partners, years in media. And we can help in that sense in terms of investor relations and so on. So, it's an important part of the industry, as you know. There's a lot of super people and the ecosystem is huge. But making sure you're noticed, and people understand what you're doing and why it fits in with your ambition, I think, is what we really do.
Well, you have to get on the SSG wheel to get noticed, right?
Yes. Well, the bet tech ecosystem.
The bet tech ecosystem, which is getting smaller and smaller because they're putting so many companies in there. You need an eye chart. That's gonna.
I need a bigger wheel.
Yeah.
You need to expand that wheel for sure.
Yeah. But actually, it was great when those guys did that, and we it doesn't sound like we work for everyone, but we worked with Spotlight during that period in developing the bet tech ecosystem for those guys, and it was remarkable when you just see it in a simple graphic, even if they only touched half of what's there, to just show the size of the ecosystem. And I tell you, I now see, and you guys probably see it, I see a lot of presentations from startup companies or people that are looking to raise money and so on, and the bet tech wheel appears on a lot of them. People back that and they say, hey, this is the system. So it worked very well as a piece of press, and it does its job, which is give you the kind of top line view that, hey, we're in a big bazillion-dollar industry here, and there's lots and lots of components that have to go into making a successful operation of a big listed company like DraftKings work. So I think that's is a key kind of thought here, really, is that there are many ways to succeed in this industry, which is outside of just kind of hearing top line numbers, but it's there's a lot, and I'm sure we'll come to it. Product and things like that are a big focus of what we do as well.
Yeah, excellent. And I believe the wheel is how we actually met Red Knot to begin with on LinkedIn. Yeah. So it served a lot of good purposes. So
maybe someday DataArt will get in the wheel. That's that's our goal.
I'd like that over next year.
Do you know anyone?
I'll make a call afterwards.
I'm
sure we can get you on the
wheel. Yeah, super. So in terms of right now, I know we speak to Ryan, quite a bit, and it's interesting, like kind of the breadth of the client base there, like anywhere from kind of the sports multiverse. I don't know if I'm using that term correctly.
Right.
To professional cricket. I mean, that's amazing. How does all these like different areas, and cricket is not even, it's a league, right? It's not even associated with sports betting. Like, how do you kind of get the ideas to move into, I guess, somewhat different directions?
It's that was a really interesting one, actually. I think that some clients come along in a company like this because there's a real interest from some of the individuals working in the company. So Ryan is a huge sports fan, worked at Charlotte FC for a long time, huge on soccer, but both he and I and a couple of our other partners are cricket fans. And when we saw that Major League Cricket was launching in America, we were like, we got to get on that, right? We all want to go over and see what's going on. And actually, credit to Ryan, he found some contacts. He spoke to them about what we do. Obviously, we're all sports fans first, right? Even as when we're in sports betting, yes, we love technology, but we love sport. And we were really lucky actually to help those guys on that inaugural competition, and we represented a couple of the teams, Seattle Orcas and San Francisco Unicorns. Had some really interesting backers, and we could bring, I suppose, to that. The team is PR and media at heart, right? These are people that have worked in the media industry primarily, way before they ever were in sports betting, or they worked in sports and did sports and media. So the woman who runs our US operation, Ashley Dabb, she was CMO at Philly Union, who was head of marketing for US National Lacrosse. So people have come into our organization from the sports world. So we feel very comfortable. We represent Serie A, the Italian league in the US. We do content for those guys. We've done work for the MLS. We represent Orange County FC, who are a really interesting USL team. We've just raised crowdfunded, kind of money. We're interested in when people have got ideas like that. They're going to go crowdfunding on supporting the team. And a lot of that just because we have that experience. But sometimes the sports guys are also very much interested in our gaming understanding, our gaming knowledge. So to give you a really good example, we represented Major League Pickleball when the MLP launched 2 years ago. So we did the first year for those guys. And a lot of our conversations were actually more around not just doing traditional PR for those guys, because they had other people there that were very good, comms people. But a lot of what we did was how they relate to the gaming industry and their data, actually. So some of it was, even if you're not going to sports bet on pickleball yet, one of the things, how are you going to deal with the data that you're generating? And, they create their own data company. And it's like, that data is going to be the real value here, right? The statistical data, the way you use that data, whether you use that and sell it to a Sport Radar or a Genius and you have people betting on it, or whether you use it for, other kind of leagues or fantasy or whatever it might be. That's like a critical piece of starting a new league now. And once you, as someone who came into US sports betting in post PASPA 2018, and I was on the marketing and tech side, so I spoke a lot to leagues, and especially at Fox, we did a big deal with the NFL. You can imagine, we're talking to the MLB, we're talking to the NBA, NHL. It was interesting to see which of the leagues embraced betting first, which, as you guys know, was NHL and NBA. To it very quickly. NFL was waiting to see what their move would be, so they were shutting everybody down to make sure they could understand it. And MLB were very kind of they wanted to wait and see as an organization. But what was interesting was when you then saw how those companies have data that they already own, and they own it, someone like NFL obviously owns everything pretty much outright, but how could they use it? Player likenesses, player image, all these kind of things became very tricky very quickly, because it turns out that maybe the leagues don't own all the data around their league. So when you're starting a new league, and we first witnessed this actually in the unfortunate, it was unfortunate in the end, but the XFL, if you guys remember in 2020, Vince McMahon kicked off the XFL again, that kind of, the football league, which he had started. They actually got into a few games, got a few games into the season, and COVID kind of ended it. But we were very close to the teams that the marketing teams up at XFL when we were at Fox Bet. And it was incredible when you can start from scratch with a new league and say, actually, if you were going to put sports betting information into this league, what would you do? Because all of the major pro leagues are kind of working a little bit retroactively, right? They've got deals they've already got. They're not sure. They've got audiences that were built in a different way, and they've got to be very careful about, what messaging they want and how they want the game to be played on field and during live. But when you've got something where you start from scratch, where you can say, we could integrate elements of gaming, doesn't have to be betting, by the way, it could be free to play, gaming into the broadcast, into the action, we own the players and the likeness and all of this stuff, it becomes very exciting. So I think that we've been useful at Red Knot in talking to nascent startup leagues. There's others out there actually as well, not just in how they communicate their league to the audience and to get people in and interested, but kind of how their league might interact in the future with gamification, whether that be real money or free to play or whatever. So that's an area that we've definitely helped on those leagues we spoke about.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about the data and the data sharing. I've always thought, like, sort of take the NHL, their legacy systems, they're all individually owned teams. Does the NHL own the data? Does the Boston Bruins own the data? The Coyote, who owns that data? Is there a lot of infighting? Have you ever sat in those meetings where it's like, well, wait a second, this is proprietary data for a particular club?
Yeah, I think some of those, I won't go into all of the, I've been in a lot of those meetings actually, or been around those meetings. I won't kind of go into, the detail of all of them, but I would say early on, and a lot of these things got worked out, but early on, as in 2018, 2019, 2020, things were being adjusted on the fly with some of the pro leagues around what data they were actually able to sell for betting companies to use. And it's all worked out fine. You've seen pretty much, there have been many deals done, but it was so quick. And so, if you're in the sports betting world, we all knew that, we all felt that there was going to be a repeal of PASPA at some point, and New Jersey would come out, and then things would kind of work mostly in the way they have. And it was going to happen. If it didn't happen in, 18, it was happening in 19 or so on. But it kind of felt like it took a lot of the leagues by surprise. Or maybe they just, like all things, right? They weren't going to focus on it until it had happened. Then it happened. And there were, yes. So we had to work out what the packages were. What are we buying, right? Are we buying names and logos? Are we buying the right to use live data? Are we right to use the players' names in betting context? Are we able to put them in ads, in promotions? And there was a lot of that was wide open in the early days, which is why, it kind of took a while for those books to get everything worked out, and for those big data suppliers, actually, the BetGenius and Radars of the world, to kind of make their moves and pay their big sums to control that data. And, and some of the teams, if I look to the future in there, you would say, where's there an opportunity? I would say that, big organizations like the NFL obviously decided to take a partner and let that partner manage this for this industry, for sports betting, and then, kind of pay them, they will, do all of that work and obviously pay them the kind of royalties that they want. If you're a startup league and you feel you're going to get real traction and you've got real money behind you, you need to think early on about, how this data will be used, what you own, like you say, the players, and do you want to keep control of that? Do you want to sell that? Or do you want to just go to one of the data providers and say, hey guys, you take our data and give us a commission off whatever you sell? And I think, that's where some of these conversations get interesting, especially as there are minor sports that could kind of getting a lot of traction on social and on on OTT streaming, and it means that there can be big audiences built up, not on traditional broadcasters, where you can kind of, sports betting is seen for most sports as one of the more important revenue streams.
Yeah, excellent.
Not just sponsorship.
Yeah.
Only your data is key.
Those are very interesting insights, I have to say. Like I always had that question that Kevin just asked, like, who owns the data, who manages the data. So it's interesting to hear that, it could be a variety of different ways that can be handled. Yeah. Just to, kind of, I guess, wrap things up here. I know we've kept you, quite a while, and I think we can still continue talking for probably hours and hours on that here.
There'll be a part two.
You have to shut me up. Yeah, sorry.
We'll definitely have you back for part two. I think there's a lot more that you haven't told us yet. But in terms of kind of the next several years in the sports betting industry, like what do you see as kind of the next evolution?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, in the US, we've obviously seen. Let me just rephrase that. In the US, we've seen things happen more quickly. We kind of expected it than they did in Europe. What does that mean? There's been consolidation faster. You've got a few really big players, and there's some big challenges, but there's really very quickly it moved to a lot of the market dominated by, FanDuel, DraftKings, and then, one step down, and those people have to challenge. And that has led to, kind of maybe changes in the way that certain people operate. I think the key driver will be product. I think we've seen that massively with FanDuel, and now others have moved fast behind them. But I think we can all say that they were the first to heavily focus on product and create something like single game parlay has been a massive driver of interest for fans and bettors and the margin. So, everyone's had to follow that. And that's what we saw in the UK, by the way. And there's a brand time, and early on it was brand, big brand spend, let's just get a name out there. But it's difficult to make that efficient and understand how that will, generate profits for the company going forward. So as quick as you can move to a focus on product, the better. And I think that's where the industry is right now. That the best product and marketing will win, not just the best marketing. That brings us back to something actually we kind of touched on earlier, which was that kind of ecosystem of suppliers. That does mean that all of the operators who are at the top of the food chain do need to be continually thinking, either they're developing themselves, they can't develop everything themselves. Do you develop yourself or do you buy in? We saw Entain buy Angstrom, to use kind of worldwide because they want to rely on their pricing modeling, which they think is obviously, and I think is some of the best in the industry, and will continue to innovate. So you've got to think about what is it that is going to make a real difference in your company, and then you're probably looking around to buy new services or potentially even M&A and buy the companies. So I think that's, to me, that's been exciting. There's been consolidation, which you could say could hurt the industry, but the focus on product, it could hurt the B2B industry because there's less people to buy, there's less top level, but there's basically a much more of a focus on product and efficiency, which is great. I think that the regulatory, landscape is not going to change quickly. Where Texas, California, etc. Will these states regulate? Maybe, but I don't think it's going to be soon. So I think we are where we are, kind of there for the moment. I did see a really interesting kind of bubble kind of chart the other day where you'll notice that there's a lot of interest around kind of advisors and M&A firms these days have all looked to other countries again, right? LATAM has been an explosion. Brazil is about to regulate, huge market. Mexico is getting super competitive. Those two countries alone are huge. And then there's many others in LATAM that are kind of regulated or regulated. Africa is being heavily looked at. There's launches in 6 or 7 different countries in Africa, and those two, and Eastern Europe. There's been a lot of activity looking at Poland, Romania, Georgia. So for a while, from 2016, just before PASPA, 2017, and then up to maybe a year ago or 2 years ago, even, I think the entire, the sun had shifted, right? And everyone just looked to the US. And no matter where you were in the world, and we see this world, we just all look to the US, and that's where everyone was going to play their trade. The last year, people have seen that maybe because of consolidation, maybe because of a slowing in regulation, they need to look elsewhere for growth, or to think of where the opportunities lie. And certainly in those territories I just said, is where people are looking. And that's great because they're exciting markets and they're moving. The interesting bubble kind of diagram that I saw is you could take all of the world markets in terms of overall turnover in sports betting, and they all fit inside the US.
So does that include Texas and California and Florida?
we haven't even put on California yet. That's a country within itself.
So yeah, exactly. So there you go. I think that there's a lot. It's an amazingly dynamic industry. I've loved working in it for the reasons we've said. It's technology forward, technology first. Red Knot itself feels like we have a really good understanding of the industry, and therefore we can help companies navigate throughout this, throughout whatever territory they're in. But I think that the excitement is still going to be driven in the US. I don't think we've seen the end of the big players. I think that DraftKings and FanDuel are, it's pretty unassailable. When you get to that kind of critical mass, it's quite hard. But we know we've got Fanatics and Bet365 and BetMGM, and these guys are powerful and doing interesting things. So I think we're going to see some excitement there. But I do feel that the US is going to be the place for people to really make their mark. But it's interesting that we've got emerging countries where you can maybe play a little more, and test a little more. That have really come up. So the regulated sports betting world has got a lot bigger in the last few years, and that's good for our industry. Russell and Kevin, for you guys, for me, and
hopefully,
for Red.
yeah,
we're happy with that.
Especially when you talk about product, that's where DataArt, really will shine, I think, in the future hopefully with your partners, and building, partnering with people to build products that are going to change the game, basically.
Right. Yeah, and that's it in the end, right? It's experience. It's for a long time we would complain generally about the paucity of product innovation. One of the problems with a sports betting product, that's like the gaming, is it's really just a long list, right? It's like a list. Right. It's just in the end, you're going to go football, NFL, Broncos, Chargers. Right. And you're just kind of reading down a list. So you'd see these apps and they'd be designed and it was like a long form thing. Mm-hmm. And I think what we haven't really touched on yet is things like voice and how that can change. Right. I think you guys may have chatted to, we have a client called VoxBet. They're great.
They're great
companies to use voice. There's other people that aren't our clients, like DataScribe, who do a lot of AI generated content that you can kind of talk and tap into as well, and see the dynamic things change. And I think that there's such a long way to go that we're not even touched the sides of how these products will operate for us in the future. But we also have to be cognizant of the regulatory landscape and how those new technologies fit in. And making sure they work, kind of for everybody. So I do think big things coming up will be technologies that change the way we operate on our mobiles or in our devices, in our cars, in our kitchens, on our TVs. And I think the other thing will be regulation technology that ensures that the vulnerable are protected, that that everybody is on the right side of what they can do legally without causing too much friction. And I think there's some very exciting products out there that allow that as well, so that everyone can feel they're in a safe environment, but we aren't, overloaded with onerous things to fill out and complete and do. So I think they're the two, they're going to be two very exciting areas for the next few years.
Yeah, great. Fun times ahead.
Thank you for all your time. Yes. We've got a lot of your time today and great insights.
No worries.
Yeah,
lovely to chat
really
to you guys.
It.
Anytime, pick up on any one of those things and I can probably talk for half an hour.
All right, we'll pick two for the next one.
Well, thank you guys.
Great, thank you.